Hi everyone, this is Professor Evans, and I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of a sample project for your data management system. So this assignment is going to encompass the rest of the semester, and you are going to design your own object, which you are going to manage data for. So just a quick review on the requirements of your project. You're going to define the object. It could be football stats, Pokemon, horror movies, restaurants, whatever you're interested in. You're going to define an object that must hold at least 6 pieces of data. You have to use various data types. So, float, string, integer, etc. And then you're going to have to create an application where users can perform CRUD operations on the data. So you have to be able to upload data via a text file and later via a database, or manually, allowing the user to type in all information for a particular object. The user must be able to remove data, update any field, display all data within the system at any time. And then the user must also be able to perform a custom, something that you select. So based off of what type of data you're storing in your system, you'll define some sort of custom feature, and it has to be something that makes and returns a calculation, returns a value. So, if we go back to the library management system, for example, a custom action might be a method for assigning an overdue fee based on the number of days that have passed since the book was checked out. Something like that for your project. Another important feature for this project is that the user must never be able to crash your program at any time. I'm going to go more in detail with an example in a few minutes, but keep in mind that you're going to have exception handling at every step along the way so that the user can never crash your program. And this program is going to be done in phases. Your final submission at the very end of the semester will be a data management system application with a GUI and a relational database. And so we're going to do this in phases, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of what your project should look like in phases 1, 3, and 4. And phase 2, because phase 2 provided to you on Canvas related to unit testing. So I'm not going to cover that in this video, but I am going to cover phases 1, 3, and 4. And I am going to use a sample student's code from a previous semester. I have permission from that student to show you their code and how it works for all of these phases. So if we can review the phases, in phase 1, you're just doing logic and validation. That means that you're going to interface directly with the user through the command line. The user will get a menu of options. They'll be able to perform the CRUD operations as well as the custom action, and you'll display everything on the screen. This phase is all about logic. So get your objects created, be able to read, update, delete objects, be able to add new objects, be able to validate all the user's input. So for example, if you ask for a string and the user enters a number, if you don't have exception in handling, your program will crash. Phase 1 is about making sure that this will never happen. So you want to consider every possible test case, how a user may or may not enter data correctly, and then be able to have an exception in place to capture that and redirect the user to enter in the correct information. Phase 2 is your unit testing. Keep in mind that for phases 1 and 2, there's no database and no GUI yet. We're not doing related to those 2 topics yet. When we get to phase 3, that is when you're going to add a GUI. So at this point, it should be working. Your test should show that your program works as expected. Now we're going to add a front end by designing a GUI. There's still no database in this phase, but you are going to now add the front end. And then the last phase is connecting your program to a database, specifically a relational database using SQLite or MySQL. At this point, your program should be able to read data from a database and then be able to actively update that database as the user uses your application. User input validation is going to be required at every step along the way, but if you get it set up correctly in phase 1, it's pretty much going to flow through to the rest of the phases. And now I'm going to go ahead and navigate over to showing you a sample project. Keep in mind that when when I test your code, I'm going to be using a test rubric. An example of a test rubric is on the screen. Depending on the semester you're taking this class, the test rubric may or may not change. So you always want to review the slides provided to you to understand the test rubric. But for example, for a phase 1 submission, this is the test rubric I'm going to use. I'm going to go in this order. I'm going to look for when the code launches is that a menu is displayed, and then will it be able to read a data file? Will it be able to display that data? And so on and so forth. Remember that testing ends when the first test I encounter fails. So let's say that I only make it to test 3 and then test 4 fails. You're only going to get points for test 1, 2, and 3. You won't get any points for anything else following the test that failed. So it's really important to test your code in the same order that the test rubric is given. And because that's how I'm going to test it. If you test it the way I'm going to test it, then you can ensure that what you turn in will work and that you can earn all of your points. All right, so now I'm going to navigate over to a command prompt, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to test each phase. This is, again, a sample project from a previous semester for a student who completed this class. So I'm going to have you turn in an executable jar with each submission, as well as a copy of your code as a backup. But I'm going to have you turn in an executable jar. So I'm going to open a command prompt and then attempt to run that jar. So this is the executable jar for phase 1. This student decided to do a rocket launch data management system. So they're managing data related to rockets. And so again, if you look at the test rubric, I'm going to be looking for things in a specific order. So I'm going to use that rubric to begin testing this code. So according to the rubric, the first thing I'm looking for is that a menu is displayed. Okay, check, that test passes. Next, I need to be able to read data from a file. So I'm going to select option 2. I'm sorry, I'm going to select option 1 for how we're going to enter the data. So we're going to either upload a file or manually. I'm going to select upload a file. And on my desktop, I have a text file full of information related to the rocket launches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just looking up the name of that file. It's called rocketlaunches.txt. And remember, you're going to be supplying this file of data that I'm going to use to run your code. So we can see that this person has supplied 20 data points, and they are now displayed on the screen. So reading data, that test passes, and being able to display the data, that test passes. Their option to read data is literally a display function, so that test passes. The next thing we're going to check is whether we can create data. So I'm going to go back to menu option number 1. I'm going to try to enter data manually. And here's where I might try to break your code. So when I run your code, I am going to pretend to be a very dumb user. I'm never going to give you what you asked for. I'm going to give you the exact opposite. And I want you to see I want to see if your code will redirect me to enter in a proper data format. So launch ID, that's supposed to be a number. Let's enter in a string, and I get a response. Please enter only a number. Well, now I'm going to try to enter a decimal. And it tells me, okay, I can't do that. This person might be better off saying, please enter only an integer so that I know that decimals aren't allowed. But okay, I'm going to enter an integer, but now I'm going to make it negative. And I still get another response, please enter only positive numbers. So this is what I mean when I say that you have to do user input validation and make sure that the user can never enter in anything that doesn't fit the format that you're looking for. Now I'll go ahead and enter a launch ID, a launch provider, launch location, launch vehicle. I'm just going to, give random values. And then a launch date. Well, here's another opportunity for me to see if your user input validation works. I'm not gonna enter a date. Error with a date, make sure it formatted. Okay, so now I'm going to enter in a date, but let's say I enter in the year 1. Now this time it took it. Now you may want to consider whether you actually want a user to enter in a date that is this far back in the past. This isn't necessarily a user input error, but as the programmer, consider whether you want to have an acceptable range of dates that you would accept. Enter the number of crew. I'm going to enter in a bunch of special characters. Please enter only numbers. Please enter only numbers. 12. The payload, again, I'm going to see if this breaks by entering in random garbage. The payload, in this case, this tells me that this is a string, so I could enter anything here. You want to consider whether you want to restrict users or whether they have open range to type in what they want. In this case, the payload is a string. That's why I could literally type anything there. Tonnage to orbit should only be a number. So I'm going to enter in a number. And now I'm going to go ahead and read data and see if my newly created object is there, and it's there. So again, payload is typically just a string, like the name of the crew. So that's why this didn't get flagged as an error. Okay, so next on the testing rubric is the option to remove data. So let's do that. I'm going to select option 4. Select a row, enter the launch ID. So I need to enter the launch ID. Well, let's enter something that I know doesn't exist. And I get a message that this launch ID does not exist. Okay, now I'll try to delete something that does exist. I'm going to delete launch ID number 20. And I get a confirmation that it has been deleted, but let's go ahead and print all the data out and make sure. Launch ID 18, launch ID 19, and then the one I created. So launch ID 20 is gone. So that test passes. Next, I need to check that I can update data. So I'm going to select option 3. So I'm going to select row 19 or launch ID 19. And then I get another menu that lets me choose, well, which field within that object do I want to update? Let's say that I am going to update the launch date. Once again, I'm going to put in something that's not a date. Okay, it's going to redirect me. Let's say that I put in a date, but I put it in this format. I get a redirection. So let's go ahead and put it in the right way. And I see my date right there. And if I select, and if I'm done, you know, I can select to update more fields, but if I'm done, I'm going to hit 9 to return to the main menu. Again, here's another opportunity where I'm going to mess with your program. Let's say that I don't pick any menu option that exists. Please enter only numbers, invalid input. So if I don't enter in a menu option that exists, I'm redirected, the program never crashes. I'm stuck in an infinite loop until I enter in correct data. So I'm going to go ahead and now exit. I'm going to do the same thing with the main menu. Let's say that I don't pick any option 1 through 6. And I keep getting redirected to pick one of the options that is available. So I've run through all the CRUD operations, and the last thing I'm going to check is the custom feature, which in this case, their calculation was a tonnage to orbit calculation. And that is it is a calculation that encompasses all of the data points in the system right now. So all 20 launches that are currently in the system, it uses it uses one of the inputs for, let's see, it uses the input for tonnage to orbit for each individual object. It takes each one of those and creates a calculation for the entire set of data. So the custom action is really going to be what you decide to make it be based off of what your program and what your data represents. So at this point, I've run through all of the tests, and I'm going to exit the program. And that's phase 1. That's how phase 1 should operate. And that's how I'm going to test your phase 1. After I finish testing your phase 1, I am going to look at your code and look to see that you have comments. That's the final thing on the test rubric. So remember, everything is going to be evaluated in that order. So that's phase one, and now I'm going to show you phase three, where they added their GUI. So now I'm going to navigate to their phase three submission, and I'm going to launch that. And here's their GUI. So what we have a clean layout where all of my input fields are on the left. I can very clearly see as the user what I'm supposed to enter and where. I have text boxes and labels. They have a nice use of color where this section is dark, but this section is light. This lets me know that there's something different about this, the right side. And this is actually where the data is going to be displayed. So I have columns here. It's going to show me a table once I input my data. So we have buttons at the bottom that control all of our functions. So I'm going to start by doing a file add. And it pops up a file browser where I can look for the text file with the sample data. So I'm going to do that. And here's the text file. And I can see it's loaded right here. So in terms of layout, this student spent extra time adding color, adding sections, adding clear identifiers for all of the data. So it's very easy to read. I can even manipulate these columns here to get more space. Then make this bigger. So I can see everything. Now I'm going to do the same test rubric as before. I'm going to try to add, update, delete, etc. So I've added from a file where the data is displayed. Great. Let's see if I can manually add something. And I'm again going to try to break the program by not adding the right types of data. Let's see what happens. All the pop-ups are showing on my other screen, but I get a message here. Please enter only a number. This is great. Lets me know that something's wrong. A way that this can be improved is to let me know where. Is the launch ID wrong? Is the launch location wrong? Is the launch vehicle wrong? I don't really know. So make sure when you create your GUI and you're using like the pop-ups that you clearly explain which field was the problem if there were multiple fields that are the problem. But I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and then I get another box. Error with the date. Notice that as soon as I click the box, something I typed in disappeared. So that is an indication that these were things that were not entered correctly. So let's enter in correct data. I'm still getting another box that says, please enter only a number, but I don't know where. I hit OK. And these two fields have disappeared again. So I'm going to try again. I know that tonnage to orbit should be a number. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a number. I hit add and I scroll down and there's my data right there. So I can see that I can manually add or add by a file. The next thing I'm going to do is see if I can delete. So I am just going to select a random row, select delete and see what happens. Okay, it's gone. So delete works. And then if I want to update a row, I have an update function here. I believe this student intended for you to click the row that you want to update, select update. Select the ID number. So I clicked the row. I got a pop-up saying select the ID number. So again, it redirected me when I wasn't using the program correctly. It told me what I needed to do. So I have to click the row, the ID I want to update, and then click update row, which I did. Now all that data is here and I can very quickly change anything I want to change. So maybe I'll change the number of crew to 10, and maybe I'll change the tonnage to orbit to 1.45. And then I'm going to click update. And what I just updated is now here at the bottom. So it added it back to our table with the updates. So I can create, read, update, delete, and then the last thing I would check is the custom action, calculate tonnage. again, I'm getting a pop-up here that gives me that result of that calculation. And that's how I would check phase 3. Now for phase 4, almost everything is the same, except that we're now going to connect to a database. And so I'll show you that as the final part of this demonstration. All right, so now I'm navigating to their phase 4 submission, which again is going to connect to the database. This student used a MySQL database. I'm going to go ahead and launch their GUI. And this is what I get now. So you can see that based off of the phase 3 submission, the student actually took time to update their GUI for connection to a database. They added this sort of like homepage with a picture and an image and an icon and a very clear and straightforward way for me to connect. So remember, for phase 4, you're going to be supplying a database file or a script to create your database that I'm going to use for your sample data. So this student sent me a script to create a MySQL database with 20 data points in it. And I am now going to type in my login information to connect to that database. Remember, don't hard code any details in your program. Do not hard code your program to open a database file or connect to a MySQL server that is on your personal computer. Because when I run it, I won't be able to connect and it won't run. You have to ask the user for their login credentials. You have to ask them for their username and their password, what table am I looking at, etc. Or for SQLite, you have to ask them for the location of a SQLite database file. If you hard code it, I will not be able to run your program and you won't be able to pass any of the tests because I won't be able to launch your program. So if you're using MySQL, you need to collect the username and password for that user's MySQL server and then the database and table name that you want them to use. But keep in mind, the database name and table name are going to be whatever you created in your script. I'm going to be using the database you sent me, but as the user, I have to type that in so that you can use the JDBC to connect to that database. So I am going to go ahead and type in my username. You can see that this person even added the password protection on the screen. The database they sent was called Rockets, and the table within the database with all the data was called Launch. I'll go ahead and show you that now. So this is the database they sent me, or the script they sent me, which I then created. And here's our tables, Launch, and this is the data, the sample data that should be loaded in the program when I run it. I'm going to hit login. And I even get a really nice message here that says I'm connected. It's a really nice additional feature that this particular student added. There's also some other options to format the database and format database columns. Those are extra features that this student added. You can even see here, if I hover, it tells me what will happen. We'll format the database to match the required column names. So you can use these options. I'm not going to use these options in this demonstration because I'm just going to go over the main features that everyone should have. So when I click the table tab, this is also a very nice feature. I see all the data in the database. And then I would test everything the exact same way. Can I add? Can I delete? Except this time, if I add, update, delete, not only should I see it here, I should see it in the MySQL file as well. I should see it, oops, not that window. I should see it here as well. So let's test that. Let's say that I am going to delete something. Let's say I'm going to delete row 17. Okay, it's gone here. And then I'm going to go to your database file and I'm going to refresh it. And I'm going to see if it's gone here, which it is. 17 is gone. So if I make an update inside the program, it should also update the database file. Let's say that I'm going to update row 8. I'm going to change the provider to a new company called Texas Solar. And I'm going to update that. So that's row 8. I can see row 8 has been updated here. And then I'm going to go into your database and I'm going to refresh it. And I'm going to look at row 8 and see there it is. So that's what we're looking for with database connectivity in phase 4. Other than that, I'm gonna test it the exact same ways in phase 3. And I'm gonna enter bad data, make sure that it corrects me if it's not the correct format. I'm gonna check all your CRUD operations as well as your custom action. And that is how you'll finish your phase 4 submission. And at that point, your project will be almost complete, and you'll be preparing for a final demonstration at the end of the semester. So that's a run through of phases 1, 3, and 4 for your project with a sample demo from a student. If you have questions on any of this, please shoot me an email and let me know.